Hi everyone, I'm Sean. And if you're watching this video, it means that I cannot make it to the presentation. I'm very sorry because I'm now in Indonesia during my field trip to collect my data. And I'm now in rural area, so the internet connection is not that good. Anyway, let me share my screen. Right, let's jump into the topic. So the topic is midterm thesis presentation. It's presented by me, Sean. So my title is Energy Transition to Biofuel with Palm Oil in Indonesia. And my research question here are, what are the effects of this energy transition to the smallholder, which means the locals here, I means, and why is the goal is lagging behind? The main research question we have four. So the first is, what are the impacts to palm oil smallholders in Indonesia from the national fuel blending policy? And the second is, does this blending policy achieve its original goal and promise, which is to improve smallholders' living condition and income revenue? And the third one is, what's the progress of Indonesian sustainable palm oil, which means also known as RSPO certificate, and how local farmers were influenced by this certificate. And the last one is why this energy transition goal set by the government cannot be reached on schedule. As you guys can see here, there's a national fuel blending policy. So this national fuel blending policy is that the government of Indonesia regulate several years ago that it has to use biofuel to blend it together with original fossil fuel, and then to distribute this fossil fuel, to distribute this biofuel into the whole Indonesia. And currently they are now in the B30, which means 30% of the fuel they're selling now are blended with biofuel. And this biofuel is made by palm oil. And their goal was to achieve B60 in 2025, sorry. So, which under current situation, it is basically impossible to reach. So that's why we have the last one, which is why the goal set by the government cannot be reached on schedule. Now let's jump into our methodology. So the methodology is, first, in order to know how this blending policy influence the locals, we said that we need to interview with the Indonesian local smallholders. The number will be 3 to 6. It's either from face-to-face or from Google Form. And the second one is to interview with related local NGO. And the third one is that we have to review government's policy promise and its actual commitment. And what we already achieved so far, as you can see here, we already finished the interview with the local NGO that their name is SPKS, that is a Smallholders Association of Palm Oil in Indonesia. And they provide me a lot of useful data and useful information. And then the next goal I already achieved is that I already finished the summary of related government policy and laws, and also its commitment and reality. So here, policy and law, you can think it as a commitment. And then we also have already made a summary of what government promised to do before. So it is like their policy, the potential policy and their promise. We also finished one interview with a local farmer via Google Form, because he is now traveling to Bali or to some small islands that the connection is not allowed. We like to face-to-face talk. So we use it like Google Form to let him write down the interview answer. And then we will interview 3 more farmers face-to-face next Tuesday and Wednesday in Riau. That is where most of the small farmer is. And then we will also interview 2 more farmers online because of their COVID concern next week, because they are now vaccinated and they do not want to get vaccinated. So we have to do this interview online. Also, the important concept, theoretical and analytical framework that I will use, that is, the first one is resource nationalism, to explain this Indonesian government's behavior. And the second will be the global production network, to analyze the dynamic of rollout of smallholders. It's a little bit vague, because not vague, sorry. It might sound a little bit weird, but palm oil is a real interesting product that, in one hand, it's being considered as food, and on the other hand, it being considered as energy. So when this transition from food and to energy, this is also the time that we can see the role of those smallholders in this transition, how they change their position. They're being weaker, or they're being stronger, or they're more cooperative, or they're in a more strategic partner place. So that is a very interesting thing that we'll examine. So the last one is finding and our conclusion now here. So for our finding is that the first one is kind of, I would say, not surprised, but also surprised, that palm oil as biofuel to blend it was originally not to achieve like sustainable development, or to achieve a clean energy, or etc. etc. The very first purpose was simply to decrease the import oil subsidy because of high oil price. Because Indonesia is the largest palm oil producer in the whole world, and there's a period that the oil price, international oil price, was increasingly high, and government has huge budget to cover this oil subsidy. So their focus is to turn palm oil as a biofuel to decrease their import oil subsidy from that moment. And then the second one is ISPO, which is Indonesian Sustainable Palm Oil Certificate, is a little bit like an excuse to use to deal with foreign pressures, and it's not really aiming to help those small farmers to be more sustainable and to have a better management or better knowledge, but instead it's kind of like used as an excuse to present to the foreign countries or NGOs that we are doing something. And the third one will be, there is a political and economic compound has formed, in which that large private agro companies can somehow influence related policy, law, and they can also influence the benefit, which means that they can decide the revenue, and they can decide where the levy should go. So this kind of compound has formed already, and it will be also interesting to examine how and why it influenced the policy part. And the last one is, according to the current already collected data, this blending policy doesn't really increase the revenue of smallholders, and it also increased their reliance to those biofuel companies, because now they have no choice but to sell their product only domestically. However, at the same time, this blending policy also successfully consumed this large production after the embargo of European Union, and after the decrease of the consumption of China and India. So this national blending policy is kind of like a two-way sword, and it's a very interesting thing to examine later. And we need more data collection to see what the real thing is happening so far. Right, that will be my part, and I hope I can make it tomorrow. Otherwise, it'll be such a shame to improve my stuff, to improve my paper. Anyway, cheers.